and could see that Hunter was singled out. And because his last name was Biden, because he was the president's son, that's what we saw. And so the president believed enough is enough, and the president took action. And he also believes that they tried to break his son in order to break him.
Now, the White House press secretary right there referring back to essentially the same wording that President Biden had in his written statement. Now, I will talk a little bit about the timing of all this, Jose. This came just a few days before Hunter Biden was set to be sentenced on 2 separate criminal cases, and the announcement of the pardon came just days after Hunter Biden's defense team had released a lengthy document outlining why they believe that this was a political persecution. Now, the language in some of President Biden's statement mirrored that document, at least some parts of it. And we've asked the White House whether President Biden saw the document or whether he was briefed on it. We haven't heard back, Jose.
And Gabe, any indication that the president may be pardoning more people?
Well, Karine Jean-Pierre said yesterday that we should expect more pardons and clemency before the end of the president's term, although we don't know who might be pardoned.
And Gabe, how much did the incoming administration influence the president's decision?
Well, again, Karine Jean-Pierre was asked about that. She did say that the president believed that they would continue to go after his son. Now, there is an outstanding question exactly. Was that the trigger for this? Well, as we understand it, according to sources familiar with the discussion, the president had been considering this pardon much earlier, back in the summer, when Hunter Biden was convicted. So there's still a lot of questions about how much the incoming Trump administration weighed on the president, but the White House continues to insist that he took all of this under consideration and that he made his final decision this weekend. How's that?
Gabe Gutierrez at the White House, thank you so very much. Really appreciate that. Senator Tuberville said if it were his son, he'd pardon him too. But how damaging is it that the president and everyone around him apparently insisted for months there would be no pardon, not even a commutation?
Jose, I think that's one of the biggest lines of criticism we've heard so far is that repeatedly, when asked directly, President Biden said that he would not pardon his son. His press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, was asked repeatedly over the last several months if he could consider a pardon or might consider a pardon, and said no. The answer was no. And so I think the complete 180 of that decision, in light of those repeated answers in the past, clearly raises a lot of questions and has left a lot of people wondering, why say that for so long and so adamantly if this was to be the decision in the end. I do think it's worth pointing out, and you played that bit of sound there from Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville saying, if it was my son, I'd pardon him too. We've heard that expressed from different lawmakers saying they understand the actions of a father here, especially one who has spoken so steadily over the years about his support for his son, struggling through with his addiction issues as well, and especially after losing another son as well, Beau Biden, how much the family really rallied around Hunter. And this is something I know from sources close to the president, too, how much this issue has weighed on him, that his son could potentially face jail time over the years ahead. And so we know that was in the background here. I think the larger issue here, which you're hearing feeding a lot of the criticism, is that what could this potentially fuel ahead? You've already seen President-elect Trump reference this pardon and asking about whether or not it extends to the January 6th rioters, who he calls the hostages or patriots. We know he's considered issuing pardons for them as well, those who violently attacked the Capitol back on January 6th of 2021. And I think it undermines for a lot of people the argument that this institutionalist of President Biden, who's long said that nobody is above the rule of law, the legacy that he leaves behind, does it fuel President-elect Trump coming in and being able to say, this is what we talked about, the weaponization of the Department of Justice, it needs to be ended, that rot needs to be removed? Does it bolster some of his nominees' cases, like Kash Patel at the FBI, who he says will completely reform and remake this law enforcement agency? What it leads to ahead, I think we have yet to see, and that's where a lot of the criticism is based.
Yeah, and Basil, this is interesting because there almost are two sides or aspects of it. The one is what the president and his people are focusing on, which is, enough is enough. They were trying to break Hunter. They were trying to break me. They will not be successful. That's for the specific case, taxes and the gun charge. But then there's the unusual and the sweeping nature of this pardon and the period of time it includes. I mean, it covers any crimes or potential crimes dating back to January of 2014. That's a different aspect of it entirely. What does it tell you?
Well, I think it speaks to your earlier question that perhaps that's where the president is thinking about potential retaliation against Trump or the Justice Department in a Trump administration, that they may continue to use Hunter Biden as this sort of political football. But I think, and for all the hand-wringing, we're not going to get rid of the presidential pardon. That's just not going to happen, right? Presidential pardons have often been quite controversial. My actual issue with this decision from Biden is that it didn't go far enough. Like, he could have used the opportunity to talk about the persistent over-sentencing and overcharging in our justice system broadly and how it affects communities of color. Like, that's where I actually would have taken it.
Which, by the way, he could do January 20th.
Absolutely right. Because it's clear that, again, there isn't as much of an issue over the merits of whether or not he should be pardoned. People just don't like the fact that Joe Biden initially said that he wasn't going to do it. And my only concern after that is, well, if you're concerned about that, how are you going to behave in a Trump administration that is likely going to put a lot of people who he will pardon in positions of power? And by the way, he's already talked about doing that, particularly with the ambassador to France. Yeah. So it's not like, Hunter Biden's going to go and take a position of power. But we do know that President Trump or President-elect Trump is intending to do exactly that. And if you look back at his earlier administration, 3,400 cases of conflicts of interest. We should be talking about that also. So I want to make sure that Democrats understand that they've got a lot ahead of them. This is the least of their concerns.
Yeah, although both the newly picked ambassador to France, the pardon was for specific crimes in a box. Frank Rich and Clinton, specific box. There always seem to be, in pardons with the exception of Ford Nixon, a box. This is a broad, widespread, whatever may have happened. I don't even know. Right. But whatever may have happened or not happened, doesn't matter. You're cleared. Yeah. And Tim, I want to play for you some of what outgoing independent Senator Joe Manchin said. Listen to this.
Do you know of any fathers that wouldn't have done the same? Right. That's all. And then basically, I went one step further. I thought it would have been a little better move if he'd have pardoned Trump too. You follow me? And just said, let's put bygones be gone, put the past behind us, let's move forward.
Tim, you follow him? Should President Biden pardon President-elect Trump?
No. And I don't think that he should have done either. I'm sorry. I'm sympathetic to Hunter Biden and his problems and their family concerns. But look, I think that there's just been this notion that I've noticed among Democrats since the election, which is Donald Trump won. That means that the rules are out the window. Our arguments for the rule of law and for norms obviously didn't work because he won this narrow election by less than 1%. And so we can just not care about that anymore. And we need to get ours. And I don't get it. I don't think that makes sense. I think that argument would maybe be defensible if what we saw was President Biden acting to protect through pardons instead of the suggestion of President Trump that Joe Manchin suggested. I would suggest maybe the people that are on the target list in Kash Patel's book, Government Gangsters. He lists a group of deep state individuals that the incoming administration is going to look at. Pam Bondi, the incoming attorney general, said that she plans to prosecute the prosecutors. Maybe trying to figure out how to protect those people that actually work to defend our democracy, people that have been targeted and investigated, like Andy McCabe and others. Those folks did the right thing and are going to be targeted potentially by an aspiring authoritarian government. Hunter didn't. And so, for me, I think that it undermines the credibility, the arguments that Democrats might be able to make in the next 2 years. And I think that the Democrats will regret giving up that high ground I understand the impulse right now that when a man that has 34 felony counts and is adjudicated sexual assault convict and somebody that doesn't care about rules and norms, if he won, then maybe the rules are out the window. I do understand that impulse. I just disagree with it.
Yeah, and I mean, Amna, this in political terms, I guess if you're just looking at it at political chess, this will no doubt be utilized by the other side as a carte blanche to do all kinds of things that maybe it would have been politically difficult to do had this not been carried out.
Yeah, and I think there are probably those who make the credible argument that incoming President Trump doesn't need an excuse or justification to do the things that he would want to do anyway, but this certainly gives him fuel, right? And we saw that with him referencing the pardon right away on Truth Social. We saw his incoming press secretary in an interview yesterday reference the pardon to talk about some of the potential actions that incoming President-elect Trump might take as well. And I think these are the real questions, right? Does he use this? Does he continue to cite this when he does become president again for future actions, for, as we said, remaking the FBI or as he says, ending the weaponization of the Department of Justice, however he and his team interpret that? Could he fire career attorneys and say that he's, using this as justification as well? We just don't know. And I think the point being made here is right, that Democrats to some degree have lost the moral authority to criticize some of those actions because of this. And many who are speaking out against President Biden's decisions now, against the pardon, are trying to maintain some of that.
Amna Nawaz, Basil Smikle, and Tim Miller, thank you so very much. In just 90 seconds, new fallout over two of President-elect Trump's picks for his next administration. We'll talk to a former FBI agent about why he's particularly worried about one of them. Plus, we're following breaking news, why South Korea's president is declaring martial law. And later, a powerful look at family separations at the border during Trump's first administration. Our own Jacob Soboroff shows us what he saw inside a detention facility back in 2018 as part of his new documentary, Separated.
That was the time where I saw what had been talked about and rumored in the media. Kids locked up in cages, sitting on these concrete or linoleum floors.
Each week on my podcast, I'm joined by uniquely qualified guests who help me take a big picture look at the issues, like Representative Jasmine Crockett, late night host Seth Meyers, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and many more. Why is this happening? Listen now.
Sixteen past the hour. We're following breaking news out of South Korea.